it's even that messaging throws people off. Because I told you I didn't say this, but since I'm live, I'm going to say I was in a residential lobby last week. Saw someone I knew, and he was unmasked and very free. I said, you need to be careful, because I was down there and there were a couple of other people were down there. I said,
Did you hit
honey,
the live?
yep. I said, you need to be careful. And he said, oh, I've been vaccinated, so I'm okay. I said, no, you can still get it and you can still give it. And the man who was sitting there said, son, I've been trying to tell you that. He said, yeah, I'm going to be careful.
I'm putting.
Okay, I'm back
Okay,
on.
you're back.
Okay. All right, you guys, I'm going to go because I need to get going. Let me go on and bring Reverend Dr. Yuri up. Reverend Yuri, I'm sorry, you guys. You all say hello to Dr. Yuri very quickly so I can get on the air, you guys.
Good morning,
Hey, y'all.
Dr.
Good
Yuri.
morning.
Okay.
How's
Hi,
everybody?
how are you?
Off here. Okay. Thank
Good.
you, Reverend Dr. Yuri. So we're going to bring you back on, Reverend Dr. Yuri, at um we're going to bring you back on at 6:30, 7:30 my time. Have you been reading about this
Okay.
killology stuff? So we let them
Well,
go.
remember some time ago I mentioned Dave Grossman's
Right.
books were actually on the syllabus for a course at the National War College. One is on combat, the other is on killing.
I want to do something more
So,
extended, but I just wanted to
hmm
introduce this today because at the top, I didn't want to take all of your time, but we're going to be talking about you know, the Scott, Clyburn, Harris, America's no longer a racist nation. We're going to be talking about that, but I want to do an extended discussion with you in a few more days about this in the 7 o'clock
okay,
hour, 8 o'clock
that's good.
hour, because I think it's important for people to, because this young man the officer who killed Philando Castile went to one of his seminars. He was trained. It's a thinking, and you have talked about this before. So I
Yeah,
definitely want you to talk about that.
okay. So at the bottom of the hour, we're talking about the conversation from over the response to the president's speech.
We're going to introduce killology. I'm going to have you,
We're
CK.
going to introduce.
Uh
Okay.
huh. But then in a few more days, I want to talk about it more extensively because he's had,
Okay.
he trained, because this man, at least the young man, the officer who killed Philando Castile, is one of his acolytes, is one of his students. And so, there's a whole thinking, I think, that we have got to really begin to tease out, suss out.
60 seconds.
Okay. So,
All right.
yeah, so definitely I want to do that. So, well, if you want to hold, let me know. Or if we're going to let you go. Not let you go, but we're not letting you go.
Whatever works on your end works for
Okay.
me.
Well, just stay. Just stay so we don't have to call you back. But let me just
Okay.
thank you so much for being with us. Okay, very good. Oh, boy. Let me bring this down.
Yep. 10 seconds.
Okay.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Monday, May 3rd, 2021. I am Santita Jackson. I'm coming to you from WCPT 820 in Chicago and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and all around the country, all around the world. I want you to meet my morning stars over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. Meet Brian and Linda and Michael Ann and Samantha and Daryl and Renee and Jarvis and Raphael from down there in Brazil. I love my Brazilian brothers and sisters. I love you all. Makiba and Shirley from Philadelphia, Zenobia, Philip, and so many of you, Joyce and Paula. Hey, girl. Joyce and Michael Ann out there out in the West. And Adrian, I want you all to like and share, like and share, like and share. We've got a lot to talk about today, a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. Call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. Want to know what you think about killology. Do you know what that is? Well, it really studies killing. And many officers who suffer PTSD after having killed, well, there's a man, Dan Grossman, ex-military, who has very, very powerful and very, very popular seminars. The FBI, the War College, all of these big entities, national and international, hire him to come in and do seminars to help people, to help these officers not feel badly about killing. You can't make this stuff up. He specializes in helping officers kill without hesitation. And so I want to know what you think about that. That's at the bottom of the hour. And then let's talk about Senator Tim Scott and Vice President Harris and Representative Clyburn, some of the most influential and most powerful elected Black American officials in the country. Most, really, they all agree that America is no longer a racist nation. So, what do you think about that? What do you think about that? It seems that the vice president is enduring some fair criticism, and we want to talk about that. A fair amount of criticism, should I say, about that. Um, but, if you, on the books, America has abolished in large measure these racist laws, but in practice we are still racist. So we've got to talk about that today. And what's the difference between a Black legislator and a Black leader? Ultimately, to me, that is the question. You have to make the distinction, understand the difference between Black leadership and Black legislators. They serve two different roles, and I think that we've conflated them, and that is part of the challenge. So we've got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. So let us get to some of these headlines, everybody. It is nice and foggy right now, at least from where I am here in Chicago. 71 degrees, rainy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 60 degrees and cloudy. In Major League Baseball, the White Sox were shut out by Cleveland 5-0 yesterday. And, the Cubs went down to Cincinnati 13-12. Can you believe that? Tonight, perhaps they will absolve themselves by playing the Dodgers. Perhaps they will win. But the Twins, boy, they were on a roll yesterday, 13-4 over the Royals. And today, they will be playing the Rangers, everybody. Michigan Police Association cancels session with ex-military expert who specializes in helping officers kill without hesitation after swift backlash. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later today, just in a few minutes at the bottom of the hour. Did you know that the third round of coronavirus relief checks led to the largest monthly rise in household income since 1959, everybody? That's right, people have needed that money. Household income rose 21% in March after President Joe Biden signed the $1.9 trillion coronavirus stimulus package. Of course, Florida Governor DeSantis says that he will, of course, sign into law the Florida GOP's massive attack on voting rights. Get ready, everybody. COVID vaccinations are slowing in the U.S. as supply outstrips the demand. Did you know that even our neighbors to the north, Iowa, is turning down 71% of available vaccines on a weak demand, everybody? Although, now as of Saturday, 56.5% of all Iowa adults have received at least one dose of the vaccines, but people are not taking them. What is going on? Including police officers all around the country. In Las Vegas, for example, just 39% of employees have gotten at least one dose. In Atlanta, 36% of sworn officers have been vaccinated. And in Columbus, Ohio, Ohio's largest police department, only 28% of those employed by the Columbus Division of Police report receiving a shot, everybody. What is going on, everybody? What is going on? Ground zero. Well, we're going to see something that we have not seen before. West Virginia will be putting the drug giants on trial. Wow. The two West Virginia local authorities, City of Huntington and surrounding Cabell County, are suing McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health, among the largest corporations in the United States, as part of a series of federal cases over the pharmaceutical industry's push to sell narcotic painkillers, which created the worst drug epidemic in American history. The two West Virginia local authorities accused the distributors of turning Cabell County, with a population of just 90,000, into ground zero of the opioid epidemic sweeping the nation by flooding them with, get this, everybody, nearly 100 million opioid pills. Let me say that again. Cabell County, with a population of just 90,000 persons, was flooded with nearly 100 million opioid pills over a decade. Unbelievable. How much revenue do tech giants like Amazon and Apple make? Well, Amazon makes $837,000 plus per minute. Apple $691,000 per minute. Alphabet, Google, $426,000 per minute. And Facebook, $201,000 per minute. Tesla, $80,000 per minute. Netflix, $55,000 per minute. Wow. Can you believe that? That's a whole lot of money. And we thought slavery was over in the United States. No, a black man with intellectual disabilities was enslaved for 5 years at a restaurant in Conway, South Carolina. He has been awarded, $273,000 in unpaid wages. The courts say that he should be awarded more than $500,000, everybody. Wow. Because he is mentally impaired. He was enslaved by the restaurant owner. That's just cruel. Oh, I need some good news. Pastor Todd Geary, Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, of course, Vice President of Rainbow Push, Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, Esquire. Bless your heart. Can you believe 90,000 persons got 100 million pills? What is that, Dr. Geary? Gosh, it's crazy.
Yeah, that sounds like a business model. I'm not sure, a bad business model, but yeah, 90,000 persons got how many pills?
100 million.
100 million. Sound like a lot of distributorships are about to open up. That's what it sounds like.
Oh boy. Oh.
Put a sign out in the yard. I'm not selling lemonade, but I got what you need. Anyway. Yeah, we just gotta kind of watch it. Hopefully you've had a good weekend, Santita.
Oh, I have a working weekend, but God is good.
Well, see, working weekends, I understand that.
Yeah.
I do understand that. I also understand God is good.
That's
so,
right.
Look, we're back at it. Well, since we've worked through the weekend, it's Monday morning. We might as well get right down to it. Good morning, Chicago. Good morning, Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Come on, everybody that can hear me, Lottie Dottie, everybody, go on and wake up, put your feet on the floor, feel the cold floor coming back at you. It's a reminder that you are, here's the good news, alive. Can't go back, need to move forward, time to get moving, get started. Take a deep breath, Fill your lungs with life, and let's get moving. It's Monday morning. Get that morning beverage going, that cup of joe, that hot tea, whatever it is you need. My mama says I needed to drink more water, drink some of that too, but I'm not going to force your hand on it, but let's talk. Time to get started because I want to give you some good news this morning. And I want to focus good news today. In a few days from now, we're going to celebrate Mother's Day. And this is to get us ready. Hopefully, you've gone and you've tried to find your Mother's Day card. You've ordered your flowers, whatever your gifts might be. Go ahead and get it because the lines are long and the supply is short. They're not giving 100 million cards to 90,000 people, so you need to go on and get yours today. But let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. As we embark upon another Mother's Day celebration, I felt that it was important that we consider why Mother's Day is such a significant holiday. You see, holidays are days set apart for special recognition and remembrance of people who have done exemplary deeds that have impacted other folks' lives. And when we think about how mothers have influenced and continue to influence and invest in our development, Mother's Day is certainly a day of remembrance and honor that I believe is certainly warranted. Because you see, the role of mothers is clearly established in the stories that we find in the scriptures, Old and New Testament. Who can forget the faith of Sarah, the commitment of Naomi, the example of Elizabeth, and the boldness of Mary? All of these examples, among many others, represent the fullness of faithful living that we should all honor and exemplify. You see, Sarah's example demonstrates the hope of blessing even when it appears that the season of blessing seems to have passed us by. Naomi's example demonstrates the power of serving for someone who is maybe not your child by birth. How many of us have play mamas and aunties and all of those who have given us the benefit of extra love? Had Naomi not taught Ruth how to worship in a new place, Ruth would have never caught the attention of Boaz, never become his wife, and never would have given birth that we find in the lineage of Jesus Christ in the Christian scriptures. And so we have to remember that mothers play a tremendous role. Elizabeth's example shows us how God prepares us for the awesome blessing that is ultimately coming. Had Elizabeth not been faithful in birthing John the Baptist, the messenger who would ultimately announce Jesus' arrival, that ministry might never have been heard. And so I'm saying that we follow the example of mothers because they serve at times and in ways that often go underappreciated in the moment, but are pivotal in what would ultimately become generational success. And so what I want to say to you is that the common factor amongst all these women is a lifestyle of faith. That's what I want to call you to today, is to be faithful in your commitment, in your execution, in your outlook, in your perspective, in your appreciation. No matter what the circumstance, these women all demonstrate a level of faith that continues to inspire us to be used by God in very tremendous and awesome ways. These mothers are the models, the role models that have made our mothers, either birth or surrogate, the wonderful models of faith and witness that we celebrate in the coming days. And so I remember my mother in a special way, not just for what she did in my life, but how she showed me how to exercise my faith no matter what my situation in life. So celebrate mama's faith, celebrate the example, celebrate the love and the perspective that mothers, birth or surrogate, have given to all of us. And we remember that with all that our mothers have done, it's most important that we remember what these women of virtue have shown us in scripture and in life, how to live by faith and serve God by serving others. And so we celebrate the power of the official function, role, purpose, benefit, blessing, and value of mothers today. And we thank God for causing our lives to be better because of them. So the good news is whether your birth relationship, your surrogate relationship has nurtured you, somebody somewhere has nurtured you to help you become who you are, celebrate them in the coming days for Mother's Day and make that your investment in changing the world by showing appreciation. And always remember, there's greatness inside of you. That's the good news for the week. Go out and change the world. Do what you were created to do and make no apologies for it. And I'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Pastor Yuri will be back with us at the bottom of the hour as we talk about killology, something that he's been talking about for quite some time. Cannot wait to hear his thoughts and just about not having remorse about having killed someone. Police are being taught that all over the country, and FBI agents, and on and on and on. Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. As we have been talking about COVID-19, we're going to continue to expand to talk about our health because indeed that has been her fight. Equity, equal access to equal high quality health care for everybody. But you know what? Right now, we're still in the midst of this pandemic, which she has been saying for quite some time would be endemic. It's just going to be with us. And so the fear is now, according to this New York Times headline today, is that reaching herd immunity, Dr. Deborah Holden, is unlikely in the U.S., according to experts. That is what they're saying. Early in the pandemic, when vaccines for the coronavirus were still just a glimmer on the horizon, the term herd immunity, came to signify the end game. Now more than half of the adults in the United States have been inoculated. Actually, fully inoculated, that's 30%, actually, according to what I'd seen just last night on CNN. But daily vaccination rates are slipping, and they're slipping fast. Just our neighbors to the north in Iowa, 56.5% of adults have gotten these shots. But now 71% are refusing, 71% of the doses are being refused. Herd immunity, how important is it to achieve that in order for us to get through this, Dr. Deborah Holden? Dr. Deb? Okay.
So she's there.
There we go. There we go. Nope. There we go. There we go. Don't even get on me on this good Monday morning.
No. I won't get on you. We only have like 6 minutes, and I want you to have.
You said stay off mute. The end game was herd immunity, right? Mm-hmm. And really, and people just don't, I think fully appreciate how important it was to flatten the curve. Herd immunity is one sort of known, proven way to flatten the curve, right? So if you just think about, you've got a whole line of people, and there's somebody at the front of that line that's infectious. You want so many people in between that person and somebody that is susceptible to be so long that the likelihood that that person could infect that person is very, very low, right? It really is a numbers game. You're trying to prevent the chances that somebody who can spread disease comes in contact with somebody who's at risk for disease. That's it. And so this notion that, and people have said this, which is just wrong. Oh, well, we'll just get there, through natural infection. People will just get sick, and honestly, somebody made this argument to me over the weekend, and he didn't seem to be making it in a sort of a joking way. I said, are you being serious? He said, well, this happened with other diseases, which is true. He said, this will thin our society out. It will get rid of the weaker ones, and it will, help the stronger ones to build their own immunity. I said, the weaker ones? I said, so somebody that has a health condition, or somebody who is older, or somebody who, literally, I met a young woman over the weekend who was born with one kidney. She was just born that way. She was born with one kidney. And I think of people who are born with problems with their lungs, or even babies who are born prematurely, who will be just as fine and healthy and strong as their peers, but they need time to catch up, right? I thought that's not how we want to get to herd immunity. Herd immunity is not about people getting sick. The very point of herd immunity is to prevent people from getting sick in the first place. And I kept telling people we're going to have a problem getting there like this. Because first of all, immunity that you get from natural infection doesn't seem to last that long. They're looking at on the order of about 3 months, maybe for some as many as 6 months when they go back and test to see, do you still have the antibodies? Do you still, have this sort of heightened immune response if you get reinfected? So doesn't seem to, last that long. So when that silly guy came out Hopkins and said that we'd be there by April. I immediately told you that's not true. I told you and the whole audience that's not true. And it's annoying to me that people like this can get stuff like this published in papers like the Wall Street Journal or New York Times. It's because the headline looks good and people like the headline. We'll get there. And in his calculation, he was calculating our rate of vaccination staying constant and the rate of infection staying constant. And he was pretending as if all of the people who were infected would just be in that immune category, not realizing that people with immunity through infection, they drop out, right? And they become susceptible as their antibodies and immune responses wane. And so, yeah, the goal is prevention. And it will be hard for us to get there like this because we're just beginning to understand how long immunity from vaccination lasts. We're just understanding that. And I won't lie, I'm in the category of people who feels real good that I got those first 2 doses. I feel good. I have a zip in my step out in the world. I didn't realize I hadn't been to the grocery store in probably close to a year. It hasn't been a full year because I have been to the grocery store since COVID, but it was earlier. And I just thought, why bother? I can just order groceries and have them delivered and, whatever. Like it's an unnecessary risk. And when I finally went to the grocery store and I was in Maryland and they're doing pretty good with their numbers right now, I said, man, I just missed this, seeing the food, touching it. It was just like, I said, you don't get this when you're ordering online. Like when you're online, you got to know exactly what you want. So I noticed my diet has gotten real boring during COVID because it's like what I can think of versus I'm in the store and I see things. I see new seasonal fruits and other things. And I said, man, this is great. I really miss it. And so I just feel more confident, being out in the world, knowing that I'm vaccinated because even if I were to get exposed, I've got a lot of protection from actually contracting it. And if I did, I got a lot of protection from getting sick. That was my concern, that I would end up being one of those people in the hospital fighting for my life. There is not a whole lot of rhyme and reason around why some do and some don't. It really is not well understood,
Well, nothing is one size fits all, right? So, but we need all the protection we can get. But we're watching a lot of things happen. And that's why Dr. Deb is here talking to us every day because we've been getting a lot of mixed messages, but she's been helping to get it right for us, everybody. Love you, Dr. Deborah, for holding. Everybody, call me, text me. Let's talk about killology. Yeah, that's right. There is a seminar in which, well, you want to help officers kill without hesitation. You can't make this stuff up. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Dr. Deb?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sending you much love, girl. I'm going to run on to my next segment. I'm going to call you a little bit later this afternoon. What's a good time for you? I've been, my mother gets her honorary doctorate this weekend and it squeezed my whole week.
I heard. I remember when you first mentioned it, you were talking about it yesterday. I'm free anytime after 2 o'clock my time, 1 o'clock your time today.
I'll call you. It'll be later this afternoon because I've got to do a couple of runs for her to do run. And, oh, boy, it's just, I'm glad about it.
It's so exciting. So well deserved.
Oh, yeah. We're all very excited. We're excited. She wasn't initially. Yeah. She was like, I don't think I'm going to do it. We were like, I said, let me leave this to my brothers. They have special powers of persuasion. And so now she's between my brothers and my father, she's going to do it. So that is great. Oh boy! Oh yeah, it'll be fun. Plus, I'll be down in North Carolina with a lot of my friends, so it'll be great. It'll be great.
All right, sending all the guests through.
I love it.
Well, I'm sending you much love, sweetie. Hey, is that CK?
Okay, have a great show.
Love you, sweetie.
Yeah.
Hey. Attorney Hoffler. Okay, wait a minute. I can hear something in the background. Okay.
Yeah, I just pulled up in my car, so I'm going to transition to my office.
Okay.
I'm going to switch.
You have a couple of minutes.
Right, that's what he said.
Okay.
I'm just going.
Yeah.
Let me see. Sergeant Kennedy,
Good morning.
good morning. And we have Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire, who brought this to us quite frankly some time ago. How are you, Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire?
Good morning again. I'm still on the 100 million pills for 90,000
Oh
people. I'm trying
man. Look,
to look at the business model.
oh well, let me tell you, I've had the investigator, um American Overdoses, his book, Chris McGreal. He's been on the show several times talking about this. But now, I mean, it's stunning. 90,000 people, 100 million pills over a decade. But you can't, as my mother said, you can't hurt me without hurting yourself. When the black communities were flooded with drugs, pre-crack, during the 60s, in order to tamp
Back in
down
60.
the rebellions, black people's communities were flooded with drugs. We saw it happen. And then crack, a decade and a half, 2 decades later. And now, well, what happened to me is now happened in West Virginia and all over. So everyone, make sure we're in a quiet place. And because I'm hearing some static, I don't know what that is, Devin. But if we're on, make sure you're not on headphones or anything like that, or speaker. Okay.
Ten seconds.
Thank you.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820 in Chicago, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And of course, on Facebook, we've got people all over the world, really. Our brothers and sisters from Brazil and Philadelphia, out in California on the left coast, and Columbus. Thank you, Ohio. Thank you, Daryl. And so many, many people. Let's talk today about police. We've been talking about the police a lot, but I think that there's an interesting story that came out of Michigan. The Michigan Police Association had to cancel a session with an ex military expert who specializes in helping officers kill without hesitation. Wow. It was going to be held at a big church just outside of Detroit in Novi, Michigan. The Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, Robert Stevenson, that's who would have been hosting this event, said he canceled this upcoming training session for Detroit officers scheduled for May 26th and 27th, which was set to feature retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, the director of the Killology Research Group. That's right. He that specializes in police training. And in particular, um, he's been brought into the spaces of the police chiefs, police officers, the FBI, the War College, and on and on and on to help people to kill without remorse. To make it, to bring it all the way down to something really, really basic that we can all understand. So, what do you think about that, everybody? Indeed, the police officer who killed Philando Castile also went to one of his seminars. I mean, you just got a killology. I'd never heard of such a thing before until Reverend Dr. Todd Urey brought it to me. Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, who was also a veteran and a lawyer and a preacher, vice president of Rainbow Push, senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church. His immediate predecessor was Senator Warnock. That's right. Brilliant, brilliant pastor. And we've got, of course, someone who's become a regular on the show. We just love having him. Sergeant Sean Kennedy, retired from the Chicago Police Department. He's an information officer for NABLEO, the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. And then, of course, the president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, C.K. Hoffler. I smell some lawsuits or something. I don't know. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push. But let me start with you, because you are a veteran, Reverend Dr. Urey. You first brought this retired Army Lieutenant Grossman to our attention. What about this event being hosted at a church. At a church. Wow. What is killology? What is all of
Yeah.
this?
Well, Killology is a brand that is tied to the psychology of combat, because combat often is framed, well, is always framed around an enemy. It begins to kind of change the programming necessary for persons to override the natural instinct, which is to avoid killing another human being, so that when placed in a confrontational posture, they can override that circuit to be able to engage an enemy. The challenge is when you take killology from the battlefield and put it in the neighborhood, because now what you've turned the streets of America into is combat zones in the minds of not an overwhelming percentage, but even from Dave Grossman's own research, you only need to override a few of the police officers to be able to get them to think in that way, and everybody else will tend to follow. The issue with the church is most folks don't understand what it is that Dave Grossman has been peddling in some instances. And so unwittingly, in this desire to try to build police community relations, sometimes churches make themselves available for community encounters without understanding the content for the conversation. And so it is kind of playing on the ignorance of people to advance a conversation that really has a much more sinister potential, because it begins to desensitize. We talk about de-escalation. It desensitizes the person from being aware of what's going on internally, because now everyone who rises up as a potential threat is now an obvious enemy, like we're on the combat, on the battlefield, rather. And so ultimately it comes down to their life versus mine. And so you hear these terms like warrior mentality, right? There are warriors and then there are enemies. It is actually in Dave Grossman's book, and his book has been used widely even before we started seeing it in police departments, because it was actually on the syllabus of a course at the National War College. That's how I first found the book. And there are two of them. One is on combat, and the other is called On Killing. And both of them together talk about how you reframe and retrain the brain to get some officers, some it doesn't work. They know this from their combat studies. Some to be able to be so desensitized that when violence is necessary to kind of keep the running order of fear and intimidation running through groups of people, you always have a handful of folks who are able to execute at that level. We've seen it not just in police departments. You saw a lot of that if you studied the movements from the Capitol on January the 6th. You had a mass of people, but you had a small core of those who were actually leading and coordinating the infiltration, because they have kind of that combat mindset and that infiltration mindset that makes the gathering of people particularly dangerous, and also makes police departments very, very hostile.
Sergeant Sean Kennedy, what do you make of this? I mean, have you heard of this before? Of this killology? And I mean, do you all have seminars like this throughout the police departments across America?
Well, Santina, I could only speak for Chicago Police Department. I have never heard of killology, and you have to first look at the name killology. That in itself says something. Now, just go back to the part, because I looked at the clip that I was sent, and this is supposed to be dealing with how to deal with officers as far as PTSD or them having remorse or whatever. Even though I have been fortunate enough to work for 29 years without ever having to shoot someone, let alone using lethal force, and I'm quite sure, just based on my training, if I ever had to, I would. I also know about using options where I don't have to, but I'm still quite sure if I got in a position, I would do what I have to do. But I think any human person even if they have to use lethal force, they should feel some type of remorse. I mean, you're talking about taking a human life, even though we know we might have the authority to do that when we also have discretion to try to find other options so we don't have to. But there are going to be situations where you may have to. But I still think about police officers, we are human beings. And if we wind up taking someone's life, there should be some type of natural remorse there. I think it's just a part of having to process that. But when I looked at different snippets, and like I said, I don't know Lieutenant Grossman's entire seminar, but when I listened to certain snippets of it, I had a problem with it. I had a problem with the concept of police officers being taught or trained to not have remorse from killing someone. That's just opposite of what's natural to human beings. But that also plays into the ideology of policing communities as opposed to serving and protecting, and anyone who, like say, if you were to come to any police department and maybe the church just, took the recommendation without knowing exactly what was going to be said. But that's something that's very important when you bring in a program. I don't care whether it's at a department, a police department, or any place. You should really vet the program. You should actually listen to the program before, because they might say something that might be totally against what you're doing. Now, you're talking about churches, and if someone is trying to teach officers how to kill without having remorse, there's a conflict there. It makes no sense. But like I said, it does play into the ideology of policing people in the community as opposed to serving and protecting.
Well, I think it does make sense because sadly, what we see in the modern world is our politics shape our religion, and our religion should shape our politics. At least that's what my parents taught me. And this is what we're seeing. In one of these leaked clips, Reverend Dr. Yuri, before we get to Attorney C.K. Hoffler, in this 2015 clip, he said that some of the best sex of their lives can be had after these officers make a kill. And then when you dig into his work, he talks about wolves and sheep, and this.
Mm-hmm.
He just has a really he has a view that I think we need to examine, that we need to understand, because it's out here and it's really governing how we govern and how we think about each other. And it's just shocking to me, Reverend Dr. Yuri. The War College, the FBI, wow.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. One, in the background of his research, he studies the brain. How do you get persons who are trained to kill to move past the frontal portion of the brain and operate out of the midbrain, which has been shown to be much more akin to how animals operate, right? Prone to fight, necessary to kill a predator. And so it changes that mindset and that frame. But let me give you a frame to your last point. Religion, you mentioned religion and politics, the closeness between the two of them, and it appears now that our politics are encroaching on religion. I'm going to read you a quote from Dave Grossman's book on combat. And I quote, "Meanwhile, the military is finding that the use of artillery and airstrikes in peacekeeping and counterterrorism missions can be counterproductive, and that it can be more effective to use small teams on a beat or checkpoint. In Bosnia and New York, Iraq and Los Angeles, and Afghanistan and Littleton, Colorado, the police are becoming more like the military in equipment, structure, and tactics, while the military is becoming more like the police in equipment, mission, and tactics." So what we now have is this association with the streets of America being patrolled by those that Sarge just mentioned should be inclined to protect and serve. It has now become the modern urban battlefield, where the notion of the bad guy now becomes an obvious enemy, like we're on the battlefield in some foreign country. And so now we have no longer officers who are engaging with the community. We actually have occupiers who are trying to make sure that we comport with the expectations of battlefield conditions. That makes now the notion of policing, as this kind of takes hold, and it doesn't have to, you can get to a tipping point without having to get the majority of officers trained this way. Derek Chauvin, we heard from the trial, was an outlier, but he had a record that was as long as folks on the corner. You hear it more and more. We have a lot of good officers and just a few bad officers that are kind of changing this narrative. That is very well likely the case. But as we hear from this training, that's all that you need to turn what is supposed to accrue to the benefit of communities to make it deadly. And we're seeing it more and more each and every day.
C.K. Hoffler, when we hear about this kind of, to me, this is controversial. Maybe for some it's not. When you see that officers have been trained this way, would that ever have bearing on a case?
Well, first of all, good morning, Santita and everyone. It could have bearing on a case for this reason. If you could tie the training, and I think it's going to be a difficult case. It would be a difficult case, much like you have difficult cases against the NRA and the gun manufacturers. I think it's a difficult case, particularly if you've got the police departments, if this is sanctioned training by the police unions, by the police departments, by whoever the authorities are that determine that this is reasonable training for police folks or people in the military for that matter. So you can make a case back to the training, but who would be liable? It would be back to the police departments, and the police departments would be liable in a wrongful death case anyway. You would seek to sue the police departments and the individuals that committed the crime. So I don't know that you get much more than what you would get. It just makes it a sinister story. As we are now looking at ways of modifying and enhancing and improving police departments, and we're looking at massive police reform, I think training is an important component of how we reform police departments. The NBA was consulted recently by the governor of Minnesota to help with the solution of the things that we felt needed to be put in place for policing reform in that state. And as we have our teams look at this from a legal standpoint, and also we have law enforcement that are part of our task force on police reform, we are looking at training as a component. How are these officers being trained? Because we believe that part of the problem is training. So when I hear this, it makes sense that this is part of the problem. It's sinister, it's awful, and it explains why we have so much police brutality and excessive use of force, in my opinion.
Absolutely. This is from Mother Jones. First you, Reverend Dr. Uri, and then you, Sergeant Kennedy. Well, no, let me reverse it. First you, Sergeant Kennedy, and then you, Reverend Dr. Uri. From Mother Jones, are you prepared to kill somebody? A day with one of America's most popular police trainers. Marching around the stage in a theater in Lakeport, California, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, the man we're speaking of, killologist, tells his audience that they shouldn't go out looking for people to kill because those who need killing, the gangbangers, terrorists, and mass murderers, will come to them. All they need to do is be ready. Quote, are you prepared to kill somebody? Close quote. He asked me and a small group of armed citizens who paid $90 or more to see him. Quote, if you cannot answer that question, you should not be carrying a gun. 2 hours into his high-octane 6-hour seminar, the self-described top police trainer in the nation is just getting warmed up. 60-year-old Army Ranger. This is from 4 years ago. Low-slung blue jeans, Western buckle, black button-up, emblazoned with the words Grossman Academy, and on and on and on. He said, quote, we fight violence. What do we fight it with? Superior violence, righteous violence. Before I go to the callers, wow. I mean, if it's not this retired lieutenant colonel, does that sound like some of the training that you are that Chicago police officers have gotten, or that you're hearing about other police officers? Because you are also the information officer for a national organization.
Well, let me say that's never been part of the training that I've had in the academy, and I seriously doubt that something like that will be able to sneak in to our Education and Training Division without someone knowing about it. Now, I'm quite sure somewhere in whatever department, something might sneak in until someone happens to see that. But say, for instance, say if I was sitting in the class and I heard something like that, my humanity, my common sense would not fall for that. So what I'm saying is, someone who's teaching killology with those type of concepts is only going to really pique an interest of a certain mindset of officers who, just their way of thinking, living, or whatever, it goes in hand in hand. It's not going to touch someone, like I said, who have some type of reverence for the sanctity of life. I'm glad to know that the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, once they got complaints about it, they immediately pulled that, because that's not something that needs to be put out there. But understand, based on what that lieutenant is teaching, you have a lot of officers who think like that, who feel like that. I mean, when I listen to one of the parts that talks about a person must become a predator before taking a life, and encourage officers to fantasize about wearing a cape and letting it flow in the wind. I mean, when I listen to that, that sounds so sadistic. But you have officers out there who have that type of mentality. I mean, that's something we have to really be able to acknowledge. You have some officers who feel like that, who think like that, and the results of it is what we see today. All of these Black people being shot and killed unarmed by the police.
And it's the training. It's the training. Before I come back to you, Reverend Dr. Yuri, let me bring up some of these callers. Tommy from Chicago. Tommy, what's on your mind?
Well, once again, from the hallowed halls of sanity, I'm needed to straighten out things in Nutsville. So individuals walk around and believe that there is no higher power. They believe that the Bible was written by a bunch of individuals who had nothing better to do but to clearly explain to you what your current reality is. So in the sacred pages of the Word of God, it clearly says what's hidden will be revealed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Now, is there any other reason for any moral-minded human being to ask yourself, what is this insanity that America seems to be engulfed in? Is there any reason for any Black person on the United States of America to ask themselves again, are you really an American citizen, or are you a foreign person who was snatched from a continent, thrown in the bottom of a boat, landed on Plymouth Rock, and from that day to this day has never had humanistic rights based upon the humanistic right given to humanity? I would like to simply ask any and everybody who is listening, if we are in a democratic society, a democracy, then how in the name of God could something like this ever be permeated throughout all of its states except for one, the capital of the United States of America, where the police were attacked, beaten with the American flag, and nobody was shot? Oh, wait a minute, I'm just an angry Black man because they was all white. Goodbye.
Let me go to Daniel from New Hampshire. Daniel, what's on your mind?
Your last caller's outrage is appropriate, if not understated. Killology. I would assume if somebody's going to teach a class, they have to kind of give a syllabus of what they're about to be instructing. And the church that allowed that needs to be seriously looked into. And honestly, everybody who sat through a class called Killology. I've called in before. I am an aspiring law enforcement officer, and I'm making that move from being a former firefighter. I have never, quote unquote, killed anybody, but in my calls, I've had to watch 6 people die. And I'm not an artist, but I can give you a pretty vivid description of the person because I pretty much see them every time I close my eyes or every time I stop to think. And that's the reality of public service is you're going to see things that you wish you hadn't. And I cannot imagine pulling the trigger. Now, I do realize that's a possibility when I join the police department, but the reason I want to join law enforcement is because I don't want to harm anyone. I want to help people.
And
So
but
as opposed
Daniel,
to teaching philology,
well,
I'm sorry?
no, Daniel, that's that is your natural inclination. But we're talking about the teaching
Yes, ma'am.
of philology. Stay right there because I only have a couple minutes before we go to break, and I want you to stay with us during the break so that you can speak with them. But just very quickly, and about 30 seconds, Reverend Dr. Yuri, we're going to revisit this. I told you in the next few days because I think we need to tease this out. Reverend Dr. Yuri, why do you think we need to pay attention to this?
Well, one, once it becomes aware the virus is already loose. This isn't an orientation. This is called a discovery of something that has obviously been going on. To Daniel's point, the natural inclination is to be compassionate and concerned. To override that, to be able to kind of do what it is that Colonel Grossman is advocating for. And bear in mind, he would have served as a battalion commander while he was in the military, overseeing 300 to maybe 1,000 troops at a time. He's accustomed to having these kinds of conversations. And I believe not only do we see it amongst police departments, you're probably seeing it amongst militia groups who are adopting and adapting to the same kinds of mindsets. This is something that requires scrutiny, and it's probably going to require a lot of it, beginning with the government, because I know they have had his materials on the syllabus of the National War College.
He's been speaking to them. What? Sergeant Kennedy, I have 30 seconds. You got him. Actually, 20.
Okay, so what his training is for, it may be simply more adaptable for the military. Police departments are semi-military, even though it appears they're trying to militarize it more so. That's just not the appropriate type of training, in my opinion, for police officers in 2021.
It ought not be. It ought not be. Well, everybody, stay right here. We're going to be talking about America. Is it a racist nation or not? Turns out Tim Scott got a lot of heat for it last week. Well, that's an agreement. Jim Clyburn, the vice president. What do you think about that? More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Wow, you guys, this is a whole lot. But this is something that Todd has been talking about for some time. CK?
Well, yeah, Cynthia, I unfortunately have to leave at 8 o'clock, but I think it is important. I think it goes to the whole training and the militarization of our police, the mindset, and why. I mean, we see. I think it helps to explain why we see so many killings. And a lot of people, when they shoot, just like when they come out of serving in a war, they have PTSD. They have trigger points. They have things that turn them on, the sensations. So it doesn't surprise me. And as a layperson, as someone who's not involved in civilian training and all of that, and law enforcement, it's sick when I hear these things. It sickens me. And when we pull back the layers of the onion, we understand why there's so much bad stuff that happens. But it can't all be blamed on the training. That's just one component.
You're right. You're
for
right.
Sure.
Let me bring up Daryl very quickly before both of you go. Daryl, you took a class like this?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And how was it?
Well, I took this class back in the 80s, the early 80s. I was a police officer with the city of Chicago for 26 years.
Okay.
And I back then the phrase killology was nowhere near there. It was marketed as officer survival skills, and basically after taking this class, I felt that it prepared me because killing is not natural, and you have to be mentally prepared for that. And even though most officers go through their career without drawing their weapon, I myself was involved in 6 shootings. One in which I killed the person, I wounded the other 2, and in the other 3, they missed me and I missed them. But the situation where I ended up taking a life, A guy was doing a home invasion of a dope house, what he thought was a dope house, which wasn't, and he ended up tying up 5 adults, and there were 8 children inside. And I felt that what I learned in that class helped me survive that incident.
Sure. I mean, whew, wow. Reverend Dr. Yuri, we're gonna dig into
Yeah, I
this.
mean,
Yes, yes, Reverend.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we got to deal with it because that's the kind of the real nuts and bolts of it, right? It is about the psychology of combat, and I think the point is to be well taken about police departments being paramilitary in their frame and their organizational structure, very much looking like the military. The equipment now looks more militarized than it has ever looked. But the training is where you got to start with this analysis. The Kentucky State Police just had to revise its training manual because guess what? Somebody actually read it and found out there were quotes tied to warrior mentality attributed to the KKK and Robert E. Lee. Well, go figure. So when we start looking, as you will see in these pattern and practice investigations, DOJ is going to probably start with training, but it's certainly not going to end with training to begin to look at how do we do constitutional policing in America.
And I want to thank you, Sergeant Kennedy, C.K. Hoffler, Attorney Hoffler, and Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri Esquire for being with us. We're going to talk about this more later on in the next few days because I think we've got to dig down. We've got to dig down. Indeed, Catherine, you're right. We want to thank the officer who saved those victims of the armed invader. No question. Um, that having been said, we don't want to absolve people of their humanity. That's not good. That's a bad thing. So I'm going to let you all go. And I can hear something in the background, but it might not. Maybe we won't have it with our next round of guests. Sergeant Kennedy, Reverend Dr. Yuri, thank you. Sending you much love.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. Thank you always. And who do we have with us? Devin?
We got Attorney Patillo and Reverend Watkins. Kevin Gray's not answering. Yeah, I'm still trying to get him, obviously.
Yes, try him on his mobile.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Because I
But
think
Attorney Patillo and Reverend Watkins are both through.
Okay, let me say hello to them. Reverend Watkins?
Yes, ma'am.
How are you?
Terrific.
Wonderful, wonderful. And let me say hello to, I was about to say Reverend Patillo, Attorney Patillo. What did you talk about on your show yesterday? What did you all talk about yesterday?
Oh, he's a reverend, all right.
Oh, yeah.
He's a reverend.
We tied a Gordian knot yesterday with some of our listeners where we just simply articulated that you can't argue that America is not a racist nation without also arguing that black people are inferior. So you have a choice. Either you believe that black people are inferior or you believe that America is racist.
I'll let you tie that knot. I love it. Hear me clearly. America is not a racist nation. Whew. Oh my gosh. Oh. Because I'm telling you, I've been in some situations not too long ago, like of late, where some of my white friends, they always come to me and say, what's wrong with black people? Because they feel comfortable enough to talk. And and I welcome that. What is wrong with black people? Because like we have a sense of family, you don't. Blah blah blah. All I hear it all. I hear it all.
And that's exactly the point, that you really can't argue that America is not racist without making the fundamental argument that somehow because of the color of their skin, black people are inferior to white people, which is proof that it's a racist nation. That's the belief that goes into our public policy.
Absolutely, it's your genes. No kidding. I'm telling you, and now Reverend Frank Watkins has known me practically all of my life. Now
60 seconds.
I take it right to him, Frank. Like, oh no. I said, here, was it legal for black people to marry for a couple 100 years? Like 300? What? Are you kidding me? For example, illegal for me to read? My husband couldn't protect me. I couldn't even marry him. Oh, come on. Get out of here. Well, let's get right to it, everybody.
Isn't that America's policy today?
It might not be policy, but it is practice. Keep away from me, Mr. Welfare. Come on, Curtis Mayfield and Gladys Knight. Uh-huh. They say I'm a lazy woman, don't love my children, and I'm mentally unfit. Huh.
10 seconds.
Stay right there. Hold on a second. But I want you to put it out there, Frank, because I think that people want to talk about it. They really do. They,
Well,
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Monday, May 3rd, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Meet the Morning Stars, the Santita Jackson Morning Stars, over here on Facebook, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show. Please like and subscribe, and on the WCPT Facebook page, Reverend Jesse Jackson's Facebook page. Oh, we're all over the place. And we want you to like and share, create some watch parties, everybody. Let's talk today about America. Is it a racist nation or not? There was a big controversy kicked up last week when Senator Tim Scott, the black Republican senator, made the assertion after the Biden address, President Biden's address before Congress. He said, look, hear me clearly. America is not a racist nation. And everybody jumped all over him. But, uh, well, Jim Clyburn and the vice president, well, at least the first part of their statement, they agreed with him. They said, oh, America is not a racist nation, but we've got to look at ongoing racism. We've got to look at all of these other things. But they did say that. So what do you think about that? What do you think about that? Your thoughts. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. If you want to send me a text, GWC Injury Lawyers will give you the opportunity to do that. 773-763-9278. Want to get your thoughts. I love to see what you're writing, but I want to hear your voices today, everybody. Lift them up. Let's talk about it today on the Santita Jackson Show. But first, let's get through some of these headlines. In Chicago, it's really foggy out right now, everybody. 71 degrees. Rainy. Minneapolis, St. Paul. Definitely bring it down just a little bit. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 60 degrees. Cloudy. And in Major League Baseball, Devin, let's bring this down just a little bit more. Okay, the White Sox were shut out by Cleveland yesterday, 5-0. The Cubs lost in a squeaker to Cincinnati, 13-12. Today they'll be playing the Dodgers. The Twins were triumphant over the Rose, 13-4, and today they will be playing the Rangers, everybody. What are some things that you ought to know? Well, we're looking at the coronavirus. The U.S. is showing signs of returning to normal after a year. 2 carnival cruise ships returned to a Texas port, signaling a glimmer of hope for a cruise industry that has been all but frozen. Disneyland is reopened for the first time in over a year. The CDC says that almost 8% of the millions of people who got the first COVID shot of Pfizer or Moderna haven't gotten the second one. What's going on, everybody? In India is on the brink of reporting 20 million coronavirus cases as it continues to buckle under its worst outbreak yet. It's happening a little closer to home. The trial of 3 major U.S. drug distributors over their alleged role in the opioid crisis in West Virginia is due to begin today. That's right, the city of Huntington and Cabell County are suing McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health, 3 of the largest corporations in the United States. Cabell County has a population of 90,000 people, everybody, but was flooded with nearly 100 million pills over the course of a decade. 90,000 people were flooded with 100 million pills. That's 1,100 pills per resident. The opioid epidemic has cost over 500 million lives since 1999 across the United States. Those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. So let's get right to it. Is America a racist nation? Is America a racist nation? You let me know. Call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Everyone was really upset by, well, not everyone, some people say that, wow, Tim Scott, really? He said, hear me clearly. America is not a racist nation, even as he talked about being pulled over by the police 18 times. And then, well, for her portion and for his portion, President Biden was pressed on that point. And he told NBC News the next day, he said, no, I don't think the American people are racist, but I think after 400 years, African Americans have been left in a position where they are so behind the eight ball in terms of health, education, and in terms of opportunity. I think the overhang from all of Jim Crow and before that slavery have had a cost, and we have to deal with that. And then Vice President Harris said, no, I don't think America is a racist country. But we also do have to speak truth about the history of racism in our country and its existence today. And then Jim Clyburn, one of the most powerful elected officials in the United States of America, said, no, America is not a racist nation. If we were racist, we never would have elected Kamala Harris and Barack Obama. What do you think about that, everybody? Now, I think that there are nuances to the statements. There are. There were caveats established uh, by Congressman Clyburn, by Vice President Harris, and President Biden. But they all said, and I want to know how it hit your ears, how it hit your ears, how it hit your heart, how it hit your experience, that America is no longer a racist nation. Now, I think that brought to mind for me the idea that we've got to begin to really understand the difference between black leadership and black legislators. See, one of the things that I think we got twisted around is that those who we elected are our leaders. I think that they can be leading figures, but your elected officials represent you. They're supposed to follow you and what it is that you need them to do. We've gotten it twisted around where we're following them, and that's a problem. Maybe this is new in the American experience for all of us, and so particularly for African Americans, we've never had a black president before in more than 200 years of the existence of the republic. We never had a woman vice president before. We've never had a black woman vice president before, who's also tied to half the world. I mean, she's also Asian. So, what do you think about that? I want you to call me. Text me at 773 WCPT, 773 9278. And let's talk about this today. Let's dig down on this. Of course, we've got attorney Robert Patillo, host of his own show on WAOK, the iconic Black Talk radio station down in Atlanta, every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Some of the best talk in America you will hear on his show. And of course, he is also the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, brilliant civil rights lawyer, and the co-author of the book that's about to be released, its 20th anniversary edition. Reverend Jesse Jackson's communications director, political strategist, brilliant. In fact, he's one of the architects of Reverend Jackson's presidential campaigns. His this new book, well, the new edition, the 20th anniversary edition, A More Perfect Union, Advancing New American Rights, that he co-wrote with then Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., of course, Reverend Frank Watkins. Let's talk about this. Is America a racist nation in your estimation, Reverend Frank Watkins?
Make certain distinctions, and the distinction that we have to make is very, very difficult for African American people, rightfully so, to make that distinction. But I think it's an important distinction, even though what Black Americans experience every day in all kinds of ways is racism. There's no question about that. And racism takes all kinds of different forms, which I could, lay out for you. But there is a small and yet major distinction that I would like to make, which is there is a difference between racism, which everybody continues to experience, and I might add that the premise of A More Perfect Union is that the most central fact of American history is racism. There's no question about that. That is the premise of A More Perfect Union. And we articulated, Congressman Jackson used an earthquake analogy to talk about it. He said there's the Trimmer phase from 1619 to 1861. Then there's the Great Quake, 1861 to 1865, the American Civil War. And everything after 1865 are the aftershocks. And we're talking about racism. But there is one distinction that I would like to make, which is there is a difference between racism and a racist nation. And I think that's what certainly President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Congressman Clyburn were talking about. Probably it was also what Tim Scott was talking about as well. And that is a racist state is based on a racist policy. In other words, in South Africa, when South Africa had as its official policy apartheid, we talked about South African apartheid. South Africa is no longer an apartheid nation. Now, it has to deal with the consequences of when it was an apartheid nation. And I think the people we talked about are saying essentially the same thing about the United States. Of course, from 1619 until the founding of the nation, we weren't even a nation in 1619, but from 1619 to 1787, there, of course, was slavery. Slavery then, there were three compromises that were built into the Constitution, based on slavery. The 3/5 representation in Congress, the Electoral College, and the continuation of international slave trade for another 20 years until 1808. So from our founding then in 1787 until December 18th, 1865, when the 13th Amendment was passed, clearly we were a racist nation founded on the idea of slavery. And that idea, of course, was what Attorney Robert Patillo was talking about earlier, the superiority of the white race and the inferiority of the black race. Then there was a period after the Civil War where there was a struggle between the radical Republicans who wanted to fix the problem of 246 years of slavery, and the KKK who wanted to continue it. And through violence and the takeover of states and so forth, the KKK won, in essence. And then in 1896, the Supreme Court established apartheid in America as the official policy of America. So clearly then, the United States was a racist nation from Plessy until Brown, May 17th, 1954. Since then, the official policy of America is no longer based on race. We do not have an official policy of racial superiority. As a matter of fact, our ideology is almost the exact opposite. We stand for, as a policy, as a principle, as a nation, equal protection under the law. And so I think that's what the three of them were addressing. The problem with what Tim Scott said, beyond that we didn't have an official policy of racism, he went on to say that the Republican effort at the new laws of new voting laws were not discriminatory. They were to end fraud. That was a lie. 361 pieces of legislation in 47 states is about voter suppression. He lied, just like Trump is lying about he won the election and it was cheated out of it. So I have some more to say later, but I think those distinctions are important, even though it's hard for African American people to hear that since they experience racism every day. There's no question about it.
Because, they're approaching it maybe as lawyers and as politicians. I approach it as a citizen. And this is what I experience every day. I experience and see racism all day, every day. Every time I'm sweating when I talk to my brothers or my nephews and godchildren, worrying if they're going to get home. I mean, or if they're going to face a home invasion.
Absolutely.
It's problematic when you say that.
But
And that's why I have to distinguish between a legislator and a leader. Because my leader's not going to say that. My legislator, okay, according to on the books.
Well,
sure. I just
if
me.
there anybody who's committed to the truth, whether they're a pastor, a politician, or somebody, I mean, everybody should be able to speak to the truth, and the truth is there is a difference between a racist policy and racism.
Okay. Well,
it's not. It's hard for people who experience racism every day to maybe make that distinction. And I don't want to make it absolute because the consequences of a state policy based on race, we have to deal with the consequences of that. I mean, just because the 13th Amendment passed obviously did not mean that everything was equal the next day. I mean, we're still fighting for the principle of equal protection under the law. And Robert was correct earlier when he talked about, white superiority and black inferiority. It was based on.
Let me let him explain that. Let me let him explain that because we were talking offline, but now that we're on the radio, Robert, your thoughts? Is America a racist nation? And explain what we were discussing during the break.
Well, I like to go back to the law, the law of parsimony, just the eternal axiom that entity should not be multiplied without necessity. Occam's razor, if you would. The simplest answer is usually the best one. So when we break this down to the simplest point, we have to ask ourselves, looking at the condition of black people in America today, looking at the modern condition of the American Negro, you can really only come to two possible justifications for the conditions we are in. High unemployment, high mortality rates, low economic development, low home ownership. We all know the statistics down the line. So either America is a racist nation with a racist past, which is systemically held back a certain group of individuals they used to own through a legal means by which explains the condition of the Negro today, or B, black people are simply fundamentally, intellectually inferior to white people. And those are really your only two options. If you look at the conditions of black people today, I haven't found a way to split the baby any more than that. I haven't found a way to shave the razor down more than that. So when people say that America is not a racist nation, what they're really saying is we're not a racist nation. Black people are just inferior to white people, and that's why they can't do better for themselves. And they continue to push that messaging into our heads for generations upon generations. How many times have we heard, well, we need more black fathers in the home, as if by being black you simply want to abandon your family. They leave out the parts about mass incarceration. They leave out the parts about making social services dependent upon not having a father in the home. They say, well, why don't you clean up your communities? Well, we pay tax dollars like everybody else. Why don't y'all send some trucks out here to pick up the trash? But when you convince us that we're the inferior ones, well, then you can justify the governmental policy around it. And we created a paternalism on the show yesterday on my show on WAOK, where we simply said once they can convince you of your fault, they can blame you for your failures. Look at the crack cocaine epidemic in the 1980s. We had Just Say No, all that stuff, talking about how we needed to stop and have the moral fiber in the black community to stop using crack cocaine. They then mentioned that Ronald Reagan was flying it in on airplanes, and we had Iran-Contra going on, and they were dropping it in the community. No, they wanted to convince us that it wasn't their policy that created the crack cocaine epidemic. It was the moral failings of the Negro in America. So as long as they continue to push this idea of black inferiority to negate the concept of white racism, what they do is set you up for a position where they can now justify white domination and white supremacy. We get back to that Reconstruction era paternalism, where we want to go help the Negro. They don't have enough sense to take care of themselves. They can't feed themselves or clothe themselves. Look at how things look in their neighborhoods. When instead they didn't need white evangelicals and missionaries coming. They needed 40 acres and a mule and to be left the hell alone. So this is part of the brainwashing that goes on in America, because when you say that we're not a racist nation, what you're saying is that the black is so infantile, so indolent, so unable to care for himself or build his community, so intellectually bereft that they need us to go in and take care of them. And that's what they continue to push into our brains. And whenever you hear them talking about that America's not racist, then the flip side of that has to be that they believe that the Negro is inferior to them, and that justifies the continued domination of those communities.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with anything he said, other than, well, I disagree with a couple of things. One,
I've got 1 minute.
I don't think the radical Republicans were being paternalistic. I think they believed in equality for everybody. So I don't think that's an accurate portrayal of the radical Republicans, the most radical of the Republicans. That was clearly not their position. It was not their program. The other thing is that I would ask, like I say, I don't disagree with anything he said, except that would you say that what you're talking about, all these all these differences in statistics and healthcare and housing and jobs and job training and so forth.
Okay, 15 seconds.
Is that the official policy of the United States?
I think it has to be. There's no real other explanation, whether it's de facto or de jure, that is the official policy of America.
Well, when we come back, let's talk about it, everybody, because it might not be the policy, Reverend Watkins, but I think it is the practice, and that's what I've got to go on. And to your point, Robert, when we talk about black men and being fathers, the CDC 6 or 7 years ago came out with a study that showed that the most involved father in America is the black father. That never gets a headline. It's profoundly offensive to me as the daughter of a black father who's been an excellent father. It's offensive. It's offensive. And these black legislators who say, okay, baseline, America's no longer a racist country. I might be on the books, but in terms of practice, ask Philando Castile and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in a minute. This is going to be fun. We got a lot of calls, but Kevin Gray.
I don't even know why y'all want me on this show. You got some help. You got the heavy hitters.
Okay.
And everything it's been great.
I think it's great. I think that Frank's making great points. I think that Robert's making great points. And I think we have got to go on and make these points before we go to the callers. This is important. But you don't have the reason I bring you all on, Kevin, is because we don't get enough of this discussion in the public space. I know what I'm going to hear on television and really on mainstream radio, if you will. But I don't hear you. I don't hear Frank Watkins. I don't hear Robert Patillo. And you should. And Catherine, why don't you call on in? Bless your heart. We don't mind you disagreeing at all with some people, and I certainly don't mind your assertions. But just really think about calling in. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Devin?
Yes.
When we come in, I need you to do an absolute fade at the bottom so I can talk over that, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks so much. But you all keep talking. We have like a minute and a half before we come back up.
Hey, Santita, my pit master texted me to tell me I got to go meet the grease trap guy at between 8:30 and 8:45. So bear that in mind.
Okay, no,
I just got the text about half an hour ago.
literally, just come and say something, and then you can say what you're going to say, and then just go. We'll let you go.
Okay.
That's important.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you can do it in like 3 minutes, that would be great.
Gotcha.
Okay, perfect. Oh, okay. Everybody, yay. So do you want to react while we're on Facebook Live to anything you just heard, Kevin?
Look, everything that Robert just said, I absolutely agree with. And I think it's the conversation that we've been having offline and in private conversations about definitions and what is racism, what is structural racism, what is structural white supremacy, and the founding of this nation and what it means. And we have to keep on adding the power dynamic in all of it. And it's the power to create structures that have people operate a certain kind of way that gives racism and white supremacy its power. Even if it's going to war with a darker nation, even if it's practicing for those wars in the inner cities in this country, it's still the same thing.
Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm sorry. We have Paul, Tony, is it Christian and Anita? Or is Chris?
Yes, those are 4 callers.
Okay,
Chris hung up.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Kevin.
Oh, that's okay. Somebody else ought to say something.
No, we're on Facebook
60
Live.
seconds.
I'm about to bring you on so I can bring you on and off, okay?
Okay.
Well, I'll hold it and wait on the air.
Okay.
There is another explanation.
Okay. Well, make it. No,
for the consequences, which is the consequences of a racist state policy, slavery, legal segregation. There are consequences to that.
Sure. Well, we'll say
it
that.
It creates a racist infrastructure, Frank.
Well, no.
And a racist foundation.
10 seconds.
We're coming up. Stand by, everybody. Stand by. And remember, I'm going to go to callers, too. But stand by.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. I'm Santita Jackson. Boy, what a discussion we've been having offline. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio. Minneapolis, St. Paul is the home, but it's the voice of progressive Minnesota and the Morning Stars, the Santita Jackson Morning Stars. Boy, lighting up the board. And you all have lit up the phone lines talking about America. Is it still a racist nation? Well, with caveats, but certainly the first part on the beginning side, on the front side of the semicolon, Vice President Harris, Jim Clyburn, and President Biden and Tim Scott said America is not a racist nation. What do you think about that? Now, for their portion, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Jim Clyburn said you've got to keep in mind the racism that we've experienced in the past. And she said the racism that still exists today. What do you think about that, everybody? 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. We have a whole lot of conversation to have, but Kevin Gray, the author and editor of Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence, former president of the ACLU of South Carolina, I know you've got to leave us, so I wanted you to weigh in on this conversation very quickly. Your thoughts?
I mean, we've been having this conversation over the course of a lifetime, but of course, America is a racist nation because it's predicated on a racist foundation. It's predicated on a foundation of genocide and enslavement or kidnapping. And everything from that foundation creates the consciousness, creates the actions of how structures and people operate. more than just simple bigotry. You don't like somebody because of their ethnicity or their color or whatever. It's a structure of power that undergirds the white supremacy and skin privilege. So, you know, for me, I agree with both Frank and Robert, but the idea that America is not racist is more of the denial that the country's been in since its foundation.
Is that how you read what they said? I mean, Tim Scott. Tim Scott is the one who's had to bear the brunt of this criticism, but now I'm beginning to see some criticism that Vice President Harris is beginning to absorb. Is that what you heard? How do you think that settled on people when they heard them all say, "Well, no, America is not a
A
racist
lot,
nation," but
well, a lot of people that I've talked to thought they were just absolutely crazy. I mean, Tim Scott mentions being stopped by the police, and well, it's not just the personal biased or unconscious bias or conscious bias of a police officer. It is structural bias. It's every police officer that operates under that system, and you know, when you look at the wages and look at who goes to college, who owns home, who has wealth in this country, that's structural. So you can't separate that and take away the personal from it, because there are people that benefit from it and there are people that suffer the consequences of it. So sure, I think this country is very racist. It's the most racist country where you can't find a single racist.
Well, you know, Frank Watkins and Robert, you want to respond before I go to the callers? Okay, Robert.
Well,
I'll let Frank.
I would respond to what Robert said. He said, "Is there any other explanation?" Yeah, the other explanation is what he's describing, which I don't disagree with at all, are the consequences of a racist policy and a racist philosophy. There was and is an underlying philosophical, theological, scientific, and political theory of racism. Ideologically, you know, there's a belief in white superiority and black inferiority. There was false religion, theology, and biblical, called the curse of Ham. There was pseudoscience, you know, brain size, the cephalic index. Politically, it was expressed in manifest destiny, the superiority of, you know, our country over other countries. So that is the foundation of it. There's no question about that. And it continues to exist today in many quarters. But there is another explanation other than the inherent inferiority, which is what he described in every dimension of our lives are the consequences of a state policy of slavery and a state policy of apartheid. 95 years of apartheid, 246 years of slavery. That, what he described is the consequences of that.
Robert Patillo, well, Kevin, you're about to leave. Your final thought?
Well, I would ask Frank, well, how do you separate all that from the definition of racism? I mean, it's a racist foundation and a racist present that foundation created.
You don't think there's a difference in a policy and a
but the policy is about power. I mean, racism is about power. So if that's policy that's connected to it, then that proves the point.
I absolutely agree with that. That's why I encourage Reverend Jackson to run for president, to change the power relationship. What is my number one goal? And what do I harp on all the time? Voter registration. And my obsession is getting a right to vote amendment added to the Constitution to change the power, which would change the power arrangements if people could, if everybody had access to voting. So that's my whole history, is fighting to, I mean, I'm a Reinhold Niebuhr advocate, you know.
Look,
we can never approach justice until we approach equality of power especially economic power. That's his premise.
Well, let me say this. Frank, no one, I would never, this is someone I will say, I'll go down with Frank Watkins. I've known him since I was about 4. And no one has fought harder for equity and equality in this country and in this world. So that is not it. I think that it's important for us, Robert and Reverend Watkins and Kevin, to have this discussion because you have now 3 of the most prominent black politicians, black elected officials in America who are saying this. And it puts them in direct contravention with what black people are saying on the ground. And that is new in the American experience. And we've got to talk about that. But let me go. Kevin, I want to thank you for being with us today. Send us some of that barbecue from Railroad Barbecue down in Columbia, South Carolina. No, you haven't sent it yet. So Frank wants some.
All right.
Robert wants some. I want some. We all take
Okay.
So thank you very much. All right, everybody.
All
We
right.
go to
Did
Columbia.
CJ get some?
Yes, she did. Wait a minute.
Yes, she did.
Frank going and coming. She drove into Columbia and got it. Then she got a care package when she drove back to Atlanta last week. Oh my gosh. She said, "Girl, I'm embarrassed." Let me go to you, Paul from
That's some
Seattle.
good stuff.
Oh, some good stuff. Paul from Seattle. What's on your mind, Paul?
Well, good morning. Can I say good early morning for me? Can I just say, first off, that what Tim Scott said is a bit non sequitur after a long speech by President Biden laying out an ambitious agenda of things that will help everybody in America. Tim Scott says the response to the Republican Party is, but we're not a racist nation. And that in itself, to have a black man stand up and say, oh, America's not racist, therefore it must not be, is racism in itself. That is just, it's non sequitur. And so it rings of, he thinks thou dost protest too much. Who said, why do you bring this up, Mr. Scott? That's not what President Biden's speech was about. It was about helping everybody in America, and the Republicans respond by saying, America's not a racist country. And to speak to the point, it is duplicitous to think that our policies, our Constitution, are what defines racism. Our laws are. It's not, because we were founded on racism, but you'd never know it by ever having read the Constitution. There's nothing racist in the Constitution. As a matter of fact, you could point out that in Article 1, where it's saying no more importation of slaves after the year 1808, that we would say, oh, actually, even then we were becoming less racist. Yet we had a war that didn't solve anything, and things were every bit as racist afterwards. So let's ask this question. Compare it this way, please. We're talking about what is America? It was a weak and cowardly thing for Mr. Scott to say. Because what is America? Do you mean the people of America? We're not talking about 3 people in America that are racist. Or do you mean the American nation and our policies? So let's ask this question. How would you use the same rationale to answer the question, is America a Christian country? Well, not by our policies, not by our Constitution, but for certain, the vast majority of people in this country, including my hosts, identify as Christians. So to answer this question, it is duplicitous to simply say that because America does not have a racist Constitution and our laws are not specifically or expressly racist, but we're not a racist nation. That's ridiculous. It's duplicitous because, of course, the point's been made. What is the practice? And that's what really counts, is laws don't change people's hearts and minds. There is no law that you could pass to declare America not a Christian nation that people would accept. No such law at all.
Chris, thank you so much. Let me go to Christian from Colorado. Christian, how are you?
Patricia.
Oh, I'm sorry, Patricia. Well, they have Christian here. How are you, Patricia?
Well, I'm calling about that Clyburn and the vice president. You know what they call it, the Constitution, was all them the slave owners. And number 2, if there's no such race in the United States, why would Joe Biden sign an executive order condemning anti-Asian racism? But nobody signed an executive order for black people, the natives, and nothing else. So how can they say it? And for Kamala Harris to say that. Yeah, he signed up. Joe Biden signed an executive order condemning anti-Asian racism. So I guess they signed the bill. It must be racist in the United States, right?
Well, you've made a point.
That's all I'm saying.
You've made a point. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
he signed the executive order, and that's crazy. I mean, they talk with forked tongue, like the natives say. They talk with forked tongue.
Oh, does anyone was it you, Robert, or was it Frank who wanted to respond?
Well, I
actually,
just wanted to mention
that was a law, not an executive order.
Okay, Robert.
Well, I would say that I for some reason I think that the American leadership class, the political class, thinks that you have to admit to being a racist nation in order to be a racist nation. It doesn't matter what you call yourself; it matters what the actions are. People will be amazed by this, but when interviewed and asked a question, Hitler said that Nazi Germany was not a racist country and that it had no problem with the Jews the entire time. So since he said it, I guess it's true, since that's apparently the standard that we have for America. But the actions that took place did not reinforce what they said was their policy. And even for the argument that we saw from Lindsey Graham, where he said, well, how can we be racist when we elected Kamala Harris and Barack Obama? Well, I'd also point out that in Nazi Germany, there were several high-ranking officials in Hitler's cabinet, including Hitler himself, who had Jewish blood in them. But when you look at the policy that took place, it's not about the tokenings. It's not about the certain people being in the position. It's not about admitting who you are. It's about what you show me. I can see better than I can hear. And what I see in America is a continuation on an unbroken streak of working towards the diminution of the African American community based upon their color. And as I said, either we're saying that if we really want to say that America is not a racist country, then we have to look at black people and say, well, there must be something wrong with them because looking at their communities, something ain't making sense, something ain't adding up, and everything is fair and square across the board.
Let me go to Tony.
You don't think,
sorry, Kevin,
Robert,
I'm sorry.
Robert, you don't think that what I'm saying about that what you're describing is the consequences of a structural problem of 246 years of slavery and 95 years of apartheid. You don't think the alternative analysis I think that, other than superiority and inferiority, is that the consequences of that?
I would say that it's a distinction without a difference. I think we're saying the same thing, but from different angles because we end up in the same spot at the end.
Explain, Robert.
Well, that if we're saying that what we're looking at today is the residue of a racist policy, then it's almost like looking at a house. You have a racist foundation, and then you have a racist frame built on top of it. Then you have the racist wall paneling put up, but the furniture inside isn't racist. We still are dealing with the foundation and the frame, so we're ending up in the same position by saying we used to be racist to saying we're still racist. Maybe we're not actually pushing the same policies now, but if you look at even the police brutality context, whenever a black person gets shot, the first thing they say is, well, why did he struggle? Because now we can put the blame off onto you to justify your condition and your behavior. It's a continuation of the racist policies. So are we crawling our way out of it slowly? Yes, but we're taking one step forward and then two steps back. And America has that kind of that old syndrome where they don't like having that mirror held up to their face. We're so used to creating our own funhouse mirror where we get to reflect back the image we want to see of ourselves, that when someone presents a true image of us, we reject it. It's too hard for us. We don't like hearing like we're a racist nation. We try to peter around the edges and blur out the image. But when we're face to face with it and have to look at who we are, I don't see how we can come to any other understanding than the entire foundation of the country and the reality of many people live in today is still a racist one.
Let me go to.
I agree with that, and I agree with it to the extent that if America ever accepted its history and its present as the consequence of that history, that would mean they would have to fix it. they would have a moral obligation to fix it. And fixing it is going to cost, and they don't want to pay the cost. So I think that's absolutely accurate.
Tony from O'Hare. Tony, what's on your mind?
Hey, hi, Santita. Thanks for having me on this morning. It's great to conversation. Well, not a great conversation, but it's a good conversation. It's one that's need to be had. First thing I thought of when you asked if America is a racist nation is, remember when what happened to George Floyd this last summer? We didn't just have protests in America. We had protests all over the world. The world is a racist place, unfortunately. Yes, we have institutions, and we're trying to build a foundation, or trying to get away from the foundation that was built, unfortunately, from negative, consequences. But, politicians are really kind of between a rock and a hard spot. I'd rather, what's the truth? Would you rather have somebody be in a racist nation and say that they're not a racist place, or somebody recognize that they've been racist and they're not currently being a racist nation?
You know what? I want the truth. You know what, Tony? I want the truth to be told, because I've got godchildren, nieces, nephews, who I've got to protect out here. And if I raise them on the premise that no, America, no, little boys and girls, America's not racist, I am disarming them and I am hurting them. And none of my other friends who live under the boot of oppression or prejudice or racism tell their children that. My Jewish friends don't do that to their children. My Asian friends don't do that to their children. My indigenous friends don't do that to their children. And I didn't say do that for, I said do that too. Because when I don't tell my black children the truth, whether they are biracial, triracial, or whatever it is, I disarm them, which gets them killed out here.
Are white.
Yeah, I've got to let them know.
Our white children.
Well, I got to let them know.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
why that's
but
why
I'm
I had
saying,
that's
including
why I
white
had to.
children.
Okay, but I'll give you that. But I will say that's why I have to separate out the difference between a black legislator and a black leader, because a black leader is going to speak that truth to that power. The black legislator just represents me legislatively. I've got to make that distinction. I've got to make that difference, because I still need. There's some hard truths that need to be told about black life in America and in this world. I need you to do it. Philando Castile needs you to do it. Brianna needs you to do it. Makia needs you to do it. The adultification of black girls is real. The adultification of black boys is real. 1 in 7 white families are millionaires. 1 in 50 black families are millionaires. That's real. The data is real. I am not inferior. I've just been put in an inferior position. That is real. And we've got to tell that truth. And I don't need to elect you for you to go on and start acting like a pretzel and give me some alternative facts. Thank you, Kelly. Kelly Conway. Well, alternative reality. No, I don't need alternative reality. I'm not taking LSD. This is not a trip. This is real. Real. Is America getting better? Sure. Legally, have we made some changes? George Floyd, 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Your knee on my neck? Please. No, something about that's just somebody's got to say something else. Anita from North Carolina, how you doing? We're on our way to North Carolina. My mother gets her honorary doctorate from North Carolina A&T on Sunday, Mother's Day. Praise the Lord for that, and I'm so grateful to that school where our parents met and married almost 60 years ago. Frank Watkins, where did the time go? Anita, what's on your mind?
Well, that's why I originally started calling Reverend Jackson to tell him that my kids had all graduated a lot of college here in North Carolina, and that's where we started. And I've been with him now for about 17 years, calling in, making sure he makes the nation's right news happen. I'm not expecting, Jesus said the hired hand is not the one you're going to look to. You're looking for the man that knows what to do, know why it's important to get it done, and looking out for the interest of the next generation. And that's what Reverend Jackson does, okay, very well. And he's old, and I'm disgusted that they haven't shown him respect. I'm really mad. But anyway, and his son was disrespected and as a congressman for showing those ideals as perfect. and they didn't want that perfection because they want this foolishness. And you're killing kids, not just black kids, but all kind of kids. And this is what I want to say to the white community. Since you're superior, when you bring those immigrant women over here with no education, put them in your pockets of your ghettos in your white neighborhoods. Do not give them to the black men to reform and teach them how to work and become educated and mothers. Because they're putting them in our neighborhoods as well as the white women that do not have an economic base, and they're using crack cocaine to lure men out of prison to make money for themselves. I want all of that put in your neighborhood, and I want it out of my neighborhood so that the real black people that did all the work in this nation can be dignified and excel their generations. I am tired of the white man lying. Take care of your own mess. I don't care if you're gay. Still take care of it. And that's what I got to say. And respect Reverend Jackson.
Anita, her point has been made. I've got a minute apiece for you, Reverend Watkins, and you. Well, just under a minute, like 45 seconds for you, Reverend Watkins, and for you, Robert Patillo. Reverend Watkins, your thoughts. Is America a racist nation?
Well, I want to reiterate, um, and I want to make clear that I'm not making the case of what I'm saying is absolute. Obviously, one bleeds into the other. A racist state bleeds into another, but there's a difference in South Africa. Before, while you had apartheid, and after you got Nelson Mandela, there's a difference. There's a difference between December 18th, 1865, before 1865, and after 1865. It's only a statement on a piece of paper, but there's a difference. There's a difference before Brown and after Brown, even though they haven't followed through on desegregating our schools.
Okay.
But there is a principle that's different.
Robert Patillo, under a minute.
I will reiterate our Patilloism of the day, which is that which is that once they can convince you of your fault, they can blame you for your failure, and they can justify your domination. And that is what they do when they say America is not a racist nation. They are saying that you, as a black person, are responsible for your condition, despite everything they have done, and that everything in your community is not because of anything they've done, but because you're an immutable fault. And that because of that, now they can come in and dominate your community. We're going to improve the community by moving you out and putting condos here. That is what America tells black people.
Mm. Well, you know what? Take this conversation out into the water coolers and to your phone. I mean, into your social media. Take this out today. Let's have this discussion. I am so grateful for having this platform to have these uncomfortable conversations. I hope that it's a comfortable space to do so. That's important, that we get this conversation started and that we move toward a more perfect union. We really begin to get this right. I'm Santita Jackson. God bless you. Thank you, Reverend Frank Watkins. Love you. Everybody, the 20th anniversary edition of the book, A More Perfect Union, Advancing New American Rights, which he co-authored by then Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., will be out very soon. Of course, you can catch Robert Patillo every Sunday on WAOK from 1 to 4 Eastern Time. And of course, he is the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. I'm Santita Jackson. Thank you, Devin. Have a great day, everybody. God bless you. Thank you, Robert and Frank. Whew, aren't you all exciting? Have I let them go, Devin? Everybody, I love you. Hope you all enjoyed today. Hope you enjoyed today. Have a great, 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 great day. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow. Love ya.